Hi, lovelies. Welcome to Love Our Planet. Miss Marcie, Canada's pinup girl here. I host and produce TV shows, podcasts, and fundraising calendars. You can find out more about me through the link to my website in the description below. But truthfully, I'm pretty naive about climate change, not gonna lie. But super excited to educate myself and dig deep on how to love our planet. I have my co-host here, Jenny Carver, with me. Tell the folks about yourself, Jenny.
I'm a mental health professional and activist turned into a committed climate activist. I'm also a pretty curious and deep learner, big on the learning curve. My MO right now is connecting with other people to do what we can about climate change individually, collectively, and through political action. I'm also really juiced about the intertwining of the climate crisis and mental health.
All right, I'm so excited about this episode. Are you, Jenny?
Yeah, all about the EV.
I know, I'm so excited. Now, she's been wanting to get an EV for quite some time. And because I know how much she loves our planet, and I love our planet too, we want to know all about it. So we've got some people on today to help us learn, and we're obviously in front of EV ourselves right now. So Jenny, tell us a little bit about the episode.
The episode, we're going to just pick the brains of somebody that knows a lot about EVs because he's involved with a company that installs charging centers, stations.
ChargerQuest?
ChargerQuest. We're going to talk to Chris, and we're going to talk to Roger, who is an EV user and an innovator and has been involved with a number of different things around the EV world and early adopter. So that's great. And I'm thinking, so the reason I'm so hyped on this is that I did my carbon footprint, which anybody can do, project neutral, highly recommended to give you a feel for where your emissions are problematic, I guess I would say, or the greatest. And I found that my personal transportation emissions, I think it was like 5.7 megatons, which is like a huge amount, come from personal transportation. That's my highest emission area. So I need to do something about that.
Wow.
That's what I want to do.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's so exciting, and I should probably do mine. I bet mine's even worse. I drive a lot.
I think it definitely try that. Go onto this site and
gonna have to
check it out, because most people's issues are more in the home energy side, but we were honestly a privilege. We had enough to be able to do the geothermal heating situation. So, and folks who are living in urban areas, they can TTC, whatever the public transit is, ride their bikes, which is really, thank you for doing that. Folks who are in urban areas and can do that. We don't have that up here.
Yeah.
I live rurally, so I have to use a car. So yeah, I got to use it.
All right.
I got to move around, can do lots of local things, but yeah.
It's
so
true.
I'm in the market.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out more about where to go with that.
Let's get into it.
So Chris, EV owners are pretty chuffed, but they have lots of questions. Those who are driving EVs, but also lots of folks that are thinking, do I want to get one? Can I go where I want to go with it? So I want to get down to some deep diving on what's it like to have an EV and what's happening with the infrastructure.
It's a very interesting industry. It's one of the fastest growing, evolving industries. Week to week, things change. I will say this, we live in the most climate and geographically diverse country. It's huge. And so to build out infrastructure that'll support a shift to EVs is a monumentous task. That said, I would say the current snapshot would be it's fragmented. There's been some good investment into infrastructure from coast to coast, but I would say that we haven't managed that process well. We haven't put strong quality into the rollout from an end user's perspective. So hopefully over the next 10 years, with additional funding, with additional players coming into the market, we'll see big changes. We'll see a lot more infrastructure being developed over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so when we say infrastructure, just to understand that, essentially that means charging stations where you need them and where you want them. That's the core piece, right? Okay.
Exactly.
So talk about that, where you need them, where you want them. I live rurally up here, and I know you've just put in a whole bank. Maybe that's not the right word. In Tobermory.
That works. Yes.
So what's happening in sort of rural areas where folks are wanting to go from here to, say, Toronto, which is something I might want to do, which is, 300K or something like that?
Probably in that neighborhood. I would say, there's definitely gaps. there's places that we have a lot of work to do. And our team's really focused on that. And I think a lot of companies that are similar to ours are focused on that. In the cities, there's certainly more robust infrastructure, on the 400 series highways, main arteries throughout Canada. But when you're going up to cottage country, when you're on your way up to Tobermory, when you're on your way up to Northern Ontario, or you're up in, different pockets of Canada, whether it's the East Coast, the West Coast, driving through the mountains, there are significant gaps. It is filling, so it's a challenge. We need to identify partners. We need to identify places where infrastructure will support. And what I mean by infrastructure there is electrical service, right? So we work with the utilities, having the power required to support putting in charging stations on those major arteries. I would say that...
Is that an issue, that in some places the hydro grid is not enough to support?
It is.
Ooh,
it is. And of course...
I hadn't even thought of that one.
Yeah, I know. I'm learning through it as well. I will tell you, with COVID, there's been a lot of challenges. Supply chain and logistics challenges, transformers, materials that you don't normally think about. I'll use Tobermory as a great example. I love Tobermory. We have
beautiful.
6, it's beautiful, 6 superchargers up there. We call them superchargers.
Because they are faster than some of the public ones that you plug into that could take hours and hours and hours?
Correct.
Okay.
So these will charge cars 80% state of charge in approximately 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the vehicle.
Just time
Very
for coffee
good.
or fish and chips or whatever?
Yes, fish and chips in Tobermory. So, that particular site, we had a problem getting power to it because they were really maxed out. So we had to downsize the transformer, downsize the stations and load balance to a certain degree to accommodate the chargers. And that's not something we always want to do, because when 6 people show up and want to charge at the full capacity, you may not necessarily get it. And so that's a conundrum, and that's an issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Typically, we oversize.
Right. So I read an article in the Globe just a couple of days ago from a journalist, actually, who was driving his Leaf across the country. And he made it, and he was happy with that. But there were some dodgy moments where he felt like he was like watching his apps, and he had a couple of different apps going, and sometimes he came really close to the wire.
Yes.
So how do you actually manage the infrastructure of finding out, because that's also infrastructure, is knowing where to go and where the next one might be.
Yes.
So who's doing that? Are you doing that at ChargerQuest?
We do it in part, but I would say there's other groups like Recargo, PlugShare. There's centralized apps that support EV drivers. And so what happens there is you'll see all the chargers throughout, and you can map out your trip. And so I know, okay, if I'm driving to Tobermory, maybe I need to make a stop in Owen Sound. If I'm coming from Toronto, or maybe in Orangeville, and then, or Arthur, or somewhere like that along that path.
So the level of planfulness that you, at this point, still need because of those gaps.
Yes,
maybe we'll get better over time.
Yes.
One good hope.
Yes.
Yeah.
My vision is a future where EV charging is much like you would see in the internal combustion engines, where gas stations exist pretty much in every town, right? I see a future like that. But they won't be at gas stations, potentially. They could be at hotels. They could be on municipal property, like in Tobermory. They could be at golf courses. They could be everywhere.
Because you don't necessarily want to hang out at a gas station. Sorry, I interrupted there. But you don't want to necessarily take half an hour or an hour sitting at the gas station eating
That's right.
chips.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay.
Some people might. It's really about... the psychology of the EV driver is really about putting charging stations where they're already going.
Right.
So a gas station is sort of a detour to a certain degree. So if I'm having a meeting, say with, a colleague in Toronto, I want to make sure that there's EV chargers where we land. Yeah. And maybe there's EV chargers on the path to where we land. Right. So while we're having the meeting, we have a sip of coffee, my car is getting re-energized,
juiced up.
And then I get back on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to the question about the grid, I'm interested, we make assumptions that an electric vehicle is a green vehicle, 100% kind of thing, but it really depends on that source of the power. So in Tobermory, getting it off the grid up here, I think we're pretty green, but comments about how green is our grid? And therefore, how can we say I have an 100% electric vehicle? Tell me a bit about that.
Yes, I would. That's a great question. And, there is a little mythology around EVs being 100% green or emission free. I mean, there's all kinds of work to be done, not by this entrepreneur, but maybe by others around even the manufacturing process. But I mean, that hits all vehicle production, mining practices. There's fundamental issues in all of those business cores. So if we resolve those, or other great geniuses will come together to resolve mining and manufacturing problems. But once that vehicle leaves production, I would say 90+% from that point of view, certainly here in Canada, would be emission-free, even from the point of view of the grid.
Some provinces are doing better than others, right? Some provinces are doing better than others on that.
Yes.
On the grid being electrified as opposed to fossil fuel dependent.
Exactly. They're coming from cleaner sources. Solar, tidal, nuclear are generally our sources of energy. I mean, we're seeing a real blooming industry around solar and renewable energy. And I think that dovetails the EV industry growth, which is great.
Yeah, fantastic. Battery technology, battery safety. What's happening? Like you do hear, I know, EV bikes are exploding. The batteries are exploding. Like, do people have to worry about the safety of that big fat battery in there?
I would say absolutely not. We're rolling around in vehicles with 2,000 moving parts, a gas motor or a diesel motor, with combustible fuels floating through a system. So, there's way more explosions, way more fires associated with some of the conventional vehicles that we have. Now, that said, are there issues? Of course. But I would say that the safety ratings that are coming out on EVs have been at the top of the list. They're extremely safe from a crash test perspective, but also from containment strategies around fire. Canada's very regulated. We do a great job protecting our citizens and our consumers. CSA and others do a fantastic job. So I would say there's some propaganda there. There's a little bit of information.
Some mythology.
Some more mythology.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting there. But there's always improvements that need to be made. And I think the next iterations of the EVs will get better and better. I mean, gas cars have been around for 100 and some years, right? So EVs have been around longer, but that's a separate conversation. But the reality is, I think we're going to see really strong development in the next 5 to 10 years.
So those batteries getting safer and working well are also going to have more robust capacity to go a longer range, because of course that's something people are really worried about is you can get a couple of hundred out of a Leaf. I don't know, all that stuff, but the ranges differ, right?
Yes,
so
they do.
Will better batteries will extend that range? What's going to happen with that?
It's an interesting topic for discussion. I would say if you're talking to someone that drives around in a gas car today, their mindset is, I can just go anywhere. My car might have 600, 700, 800, 1,000, 1,200 kilometers worth of range, and I just hit a gas station when I need to. But the reality is, if we look at driving behavior, right, the average Canadian commutes under 40 kilometers round trip. The sweet spot, I would say personally, would probably be around 400 to 500 kilometers. I think if you're buying or producing cars that have 1,000 kilometer range, if you're in long distance transport, you're a courier with routes that make sense that way and don't have infrastructure, sure, there's applications for that. But I would say the average person would live very well within a 300-400 kilometer range car, which is just what I've got over my right shoulder over here.
Here's Chris's Tesla right behind him here.
Walks the walk. 350 kilometer range.
Yeah.
And I drive
And you can also
everywhere.
get a higher range on a Tesla, right? Isn't there
sure
you can bump it up to 500 or something?
Yes, north of 500, well north of 500. Yeah. But I would say this, like as a person who's logged close to 1 million kilometers in EVs, not that one, but in different vehicles, I don't need any more than that.
Yeah.
I'm going to use infrastructure that is being put in at the right spots where I go.
Right. So if I'm driving to Nova Scotia to see my family, I'm going to have to plan, when I get my EV, which I'm hoping is going to be the next vehicle, getting rid of my old one, I'm going to have to plan at that 500 kilometer point or whatever, something to feel safe. So it'll be for that. A good 3 or 4 times heading out there. I think it's about 2,000 kilometers or something like that.
Yes.
So
yes, you're absolutely right. And I would suggest this, that you never want to run your car battery to the point of 80, 90% depletion.
I'll talk to my husband about that when it comes to the gas being full and the car. Okay, we won't go there.
Yes, we won't go there. People leaving their car empty at home. I've got, my spouse does that too. Okay. I would say this, that, you're gonna plug in whenever you can, when it makes sense along the path, right? Like, I typically am always plugging in if there's the availability to plug in, because I don't want to have to think about it. Yeah. Right? So if I'm having an interview with you, which is lovely, I should have my car plugged in. So when I leave, it's full and ready to go.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
Because you never know what life will throw at you.
It's true. It's true. Well, we could have put you on to Roger, who we're going to be talking to, his plug-in, which is actually solar powered. So we're going to hear about that in a minute.
Amazing. 2
more quick questions, and I know that we need to get moving forward. Cost. I actually don't understand why electric vehicles cost so much, because isn't the construction of a combustion engine, like, I know nothing, like, it's just a battery going in a car. Like, why are they so expensive?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're really talking about economies of scale. Right.
So it's volumes.
It's supply and demand. Yeah. It's ramp up in manufacturing processes. It's really, all of those mechanisms have to happen. And of course, they're offsetting intense research and development costs. Right? Because some of these manufacturers, Toyota, BMW, Volkswagen Group, right? All of them, they've had to invest extreme amounts of money to develop these products. And so, there's costs with that. And so that's being passed on to consumers today. But what we are seeing is fantastic cars coming out very close now to gas equivalents. And I think your next guest will probably speak to this in spades, but excuse me, total cost of ownership is a topic of discussion that everyone needs to have. How much it costs me to run my car compared to the gas equivalent is completely different. Honestly, I would say I bought a Honda Civic behind me. The reality is that's the cost equivalent. Even though the sticker shock is there, once you drive that home and you realize there's no oil changes, there's no lube filter, there's
maintenance is a whole different story. It's the battery really you're thinking about.
That's right.
And taking care of the body, but it's a whole different.
Tires and windshield wiper blades is what I replace quite often. Yeah. So that's a really
so the
important
upfront
topic.
is the big output, which is kind of what you have to commit to. And a lot of these technologies, like heat pumps for your home, all these things, it costs a bit more upfront. But then recovery over time is going to make the difference.
Exactly.
And can we expect we're going to see the prices going down over the next decade, so that what's the year we're supposed to have only EV production coming up? Not that far off, right?
Depending on where you are in the world, it could be as early as 2030.
Right.
Some countries including ours, right? 2050, I believe, or somewhere in that range. We're not going to be seeing, gas cars being up for sale, not passenger vehicles. It's a very, very interesting. But I think what you're going to see is a definite drop in pricing. Vehicle allocation's a problem too. So what we're seeing is, I have a Ford Lightning, which is an electric pickup truck, and for a while there you couldn't get your hands on one. So what happens is supply and demand drives the price up. Right. So all of a sudden that same truck that you should have paid $20,000 less for is able to sell for a lot more because people want it. So we're seeing a bit of that, but I think that's changing. And I think companies like GM, Ford, Volkswagen Group, Tesla are helping to drive that cost down with economies of scale.
But the availability thing that you mentioned is a critical one. I know my brother put his name on a list at Subaru in a small town nearby here. And I think there are 30-some people on the list. And this year, one came in.
Yes.
And apparently lots of them are going to Quebec because Quebec's infrastructure is really good, and there's maybe more incentive programs from the government. I don't know the whole story, but there's reasons, and the backup is critical. So if you want one, you got to get your name in there. Decide what you want and get your name on the list, right?
Yes, you absolutely
I got to do that. I got to go and do that right now.
There you go. Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or a used vehicle is a good option too.
I was going to say, I was looking to see what was coming up used, and there's some Lightnings and some Leafs and some Bolts available that are
definitely.
Even some of them were in the teens.
Yes.
From what I was very, very quick dive into that. So that's going to be a whole new availability, right? As people move into the next level. Yeah.
Yeah, and these vehicles last a long time if they're maintained well. Yeah. The warranties on the batteries are long. Yeah. As long as you maintain it well, you're going to have a vehicle for a long, long time.
Yeah, beautiful. So you've been an early adopter, not only an adopter, but an innovator to really support other people to make the choice,
Yes.
which is fantastic.
Thank you.
And you've had a couple of rounds of different, entrepreneurial projects going on. Tell us just quickly how we can learn more about ChargerQuest and who else is collaborating in this world out here, the space.
Yes, there's a lot of great players out there in the Canadian landscape that I'm very proud to be a part of that ecosystem. My company is called ChargerQuest. We're Canada's EV charging network. And we also have a subsidiary that sells chargers and installs as well as solar. So we're dovetailing
Solar chargers that one could have at home or that go into like a bank, whatever you want, an array.
Yeah, like putting out, building solar capacity at commercial properties most part. We're doing some the best things we can to support the growth of EV charging in this country.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And Chris, you're local to Grey Bruce.
Pretty close.
I know you love BC too, but
Yes.
it's good to have you doing this around here because we want to get folks charged up, shall we
Yes,
say,
we do.
about
Charged
EVs.
up.
So
I love
thanks
it.
so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Great to meet you,
Real
and
pleasure.
thanks for bringing your ride. You didn't bring the Lightning, you brought the
Tesla
comfy
today.
ride. Yeah.
Yes.
I guess the Fords. Is the Lightning
Very
comfy?
comfy.
Okay.
Very comfy.
Good to know.
Yes.
Good.
Thank
Thanks
you
a
very
lot.
much. Thank you.
Great to have you here today.
I appreciate it.
Hi, Roger.
Hi, Jenny.
We're sitting out here on this beautiful sunny day.
Yep.
In front of your EV.
Yes.
And what's going on with it?
Well, it's currently being charged, and it's being charged from our solar collectors, which are over there.
So you have a solar vehicle.
Now I do. As long as it's running on solar energy, it's a solar-powered vehicle, which that's a beauty. That's probably the single most important thing about an EV is that it's capable of running on low carbon energy. It's not tied inextricably to fossil fuels as internal combustion engines are.
Right. So does that mean you can only charge it when the sun's out?
No, at this location where we have we're off grid and we have solar. The primary energy comes from solar. It's stored overnight on batteries. I could charge it at night. It would be solar energy coming out of those batteries.
Gotcha.
But of course, I can, when I'm not here at this location, I can charge it in I can plug it in on the electrical grid or at any charging station when I'm on a trip.
Gotcha.
What's most common for most people, of course, is charging at their home.
Just on a regular voltage, or do you have to put in some super voltage?
Well, there's 3 levels of chargers: level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is just a regular 120 volt, 15 amp outlet. So
which is what most of us have.
That's what most of us have.
Okay.
And in that case, that car will charge over a couple of days. The next level up is, which interestingly enough is enough. That's what I have for most applications, because most people commute. Chris was saying 40 clicks or less per day. So you could use a level 1 charger and get through a typical day. Next level up from level 1 charger is level 2, which is also can be installed in a home, which is 240 volts, and there you can you recharge that vehicle overnight. So that makes it completely practical for most days, fully charged overnight. And next level up from that is level 3 charging, which isn't a domestic standard, but it's something you get at some public charging stations.
Those ones they call fast chargers.
Fast charging.
So what ChargerQuest, what Chris was telling us about?
What Chris was talking about earlier, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Tesla superchargers, there are other fast DC charging stations. So if you're on a trip and you want to recharge over lunch, then you can use a level 3 charger, and in the time it takes to have lunch, you can charge your vehicle up to 80-90%.
So lots of options, actually.
There are a lot of options.
Solar is like a supreme option. So
well,
when you think about it, right?
Clean energy source is a zero carbon energy source is the ultimate. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. So I'm hoping my next vehicle is going to be an EV.
Yeah.
And I know that you were probably one of the earliest adopters I know this side of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You had some hybrids, and how long have you had the straight up EV, the BEV?
This BEV I've had it since April of 2017.
Okay.
It has 103,000 kilometers on it. So whatever that adds up to, 6 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And was this the first EV that you've had, that you bought?
This is a Chevy Bolt battery electric vehicle. It's not a hybrid.
Yeah.
And before that, I had a Chevy Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid.
Okay.
And a plug-in hybrid takes energy from the grid to recharge a battery. Once it goes past a certain distance, once it runs out of battery energy, then the gasoline engine kicks in.
So you get that the range bump kind of thing.
And after that, you have as much range as an internal combustion engine car.
Right.
So plug-in hybrids are a good technology if your life situation is such that you normally typically go 40 kilometers, say, in your commuting day, if your commute is under the EV range of a plug-in electric vehicle, then it can be very attractive because you run in EV mode most days, and then if you're going for a long trip, you don't have to worry about range.
It just kicks in.
You just go.
Yeah. But if we really truly love this planet,
yes,
we would choose the EV, straight battery EV, because you're not having to rely on any combustible engine capacity. Therefore, the bad energy sources.
I think that's right, but it's actually a matter of debate at the moment.
Oh, okay.
The president of Toyota was making the point in the past month that plug-in hybrids are arguably have lower emissions than battery electric vehicles.
In the whole life cycle, meaning?
If you consider the energy, the materials and the emissions that are associated with making the batteries.
Gotcha.
And then that may be the case. I don't know whether that assertion by the president of Toyota is true.
Because they're not making straight-on EVs,
they're not making
right?
straight-on EVs. But it brings up the point that there's no perfectly clean technology. EVs are a better technology, a cleaner technology, but an EV with a big battery in it has a lot of embodied energy.
Right.
So there's an issue, a critical issue is how much battery should you have in the vehicle.
Right.
Really, you should have enough for your needs, but it's wasteful.
Usual needs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah. So that's an unavoidable issue with EVs is the having a right-sized battery.
Right.
Because too much battery is a waste, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that in one sec. I want to think about how has it been for you, things like the ongoing maintenance of your vehicle, how you found. So let's talk first of all about, does it cost more or less to run this baby?
It costs much less to run. There's no gas and minimal maintenance.
And you're not paying for fuel because you're getting it from the solar. The grid.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
Or if in our case, we're not paying anything for the fuel, at least no immediate cost. If you're recharging from the grid, the costs are much, much less than gasoline costs.
So if you were recharging, you go down to whatever percentage, 20%, and you go up to Tobermory to the ChargerQuest place. Yeah. What do you actually have to pay to get it up to 100%? Like what? I mean, I think yesterday I paid $100 to load up my, 50-liter.
Yeah. So
what would you pay for a fill up, so to speak?
Right. Good question. I don't know the answer to that question because I don't do
nothing.
it. I recharge. I don't use public charging or very rarely, but it's much less. Like it may be $10 or $20 versus your $100, right?
Okay.
So, and if you recharge from home, which is the practical thing to do for most people on most days, then it's pennies compared to gasoline.
Right. And what about the ongoing maintenance? Because, it seems to me as my car ages, I'm putting everything's $1,000. It seems.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the maintenance costs ongoing for the Navy.
Well, they're very low so far.
What have you had to do?
Those things that are common with an internal combustion engine, those maintenance items, of course, you still have tires,
right?
Windshield wipers, and so on. But you don't have oil changes. You don't have engine tune-ups.
What do you have?
You have all the maintenance that on the parts of the car that are common with your current car. Tires, brakes. Although brakes, there's less maintenance required on the brakes because you use them less because of the regenerative braking in an EV. So most of the braking that you do in an EV is regenerative braking, which is basically taking the kinetic energy of the car and putting it back in the battery, or most of it back in the battery. So you use a
rebound or something to slow yourself down.
Yeah, you use the electric motor that drives the car normally. It gets effectively turned into a generator, and the braking force is applied to the motor instead of the
to the tire
brakes
and the axle and all that.
And that generates electricity, and you put energy back into the battery. So it's EVs are in that way and other ways actually much more efficient than ICEs.
And what about
the question was on maintenance, and that means that your brake maintenance is much less.
Yeah. Now, what about the battery? You had your car for, I'm thinking, 6 years. This one. Did you buy the Bolt new?
Bought the Bolt new in 2017, and
do you mind me asking what the price point was at that point, or in and around
I can't remember exactly. I think it's around $42,000, and we had, and at that point there was a provincial rebate,
right?
So it took it down into the 30s, low 30s maybe.
Yeah.
And then the truth is that car has had its battery replaced under GM warranty.
Oh. Okay.
I had. So there was a warranty on the battery, and it's good that there was,
so to speak.
Because there's a completely new battery pack put in there in last year.
Okay. And is that, I guess it's hard to say, is that a usual thing? I know your other members of your family, have they had to have battery replacements after a certain amount of
no,
miles?
I don't think so. And this was, it's a GM. LG Chem was a supplier. It's a Korean, I believe, battery manufacturer.
Okay.
And they had concerns about safety, so GM replaced, although there weren't too many incidents. There were enough that GM decided we need to replace all of these batteries.
Right.
And the reality, of course, is this technology is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
As Chris was saying, the ICE cars are 120 years old. This generation of battery electric cars with lithium-ion batteries is 20 years old, say. Right. So it's new technology.
Yeah. And from what Chris is saying, that it's going to get a lot better.
Yes, it will.
Or maybe it already did, from the 2017 battery to the one that you now got
definitely.
in there. So you were talking a little bit about the right sizing of the battery and the issue of range. I mean, I know you've done some traveling. I know I want to buy a car that will allow me to, here and there, not all the time, but mostly I'm going a short distance. But sometimes I want to be able to drive to the coast to see my family, to Nova Scotia. So tell me about the sort of range considerations and battery size, and how the mix mix goes.
Well, that car, the Bolt, has range in the summertime of close to 500 kilometers.
Whoa!
And it, but the reality of all EVs is that in the winter the range is down quite a bit.
Right.
Both because the batteries are less efficient at lower temperatures, and because you have to use battery energy to heat the car.
Right.
Unlike internal combustion engine that uses waste heat to heat the car.
Right.
But electric motor is 90+% efficient, whereas your internal combustion engine is at best 30% efficient, likely in the 20s. And it's the waste heat. It's the difference between 125% efficiency that heat is going, you can use to heat the car. So back to this range issue, right sizing the batteries. The reality is most days I could live with less than 100 clicks range for my commute, as we talked about earlier. So the trick is it's costly in dollars and weight
and
volume
and
the environment to add range that you don't need regularly. So that's a bit of a dilemma for an EV owner, and it's an environmental issue. So a concrete example, though, of something that's right-sized is my sister has a Nissan Leaf that's now 11 years old. It's been through 11
and
winters here.
that's a full battery EV.
And it's a full battery EV with 120 kilometers range, and she uses it most every day for local errands. Right. And it's fine and totally practical, and that's true for most people. A vehicle of that range most of the time would be fine. Right. And then so we collectively have an issue of, well, how do we add this extra range, because there are costs or all these costs associated with that extra range.
You don't want to oversize it because that cuts away from the embedded all of the efficiencies from an energy and a planet impact perspective. Okay. Interesting.
And yet so I don't have that much experience on long trips, but another relative of ours, our relatives have gone to the West Coast, including in to BC in February and back in their EV, in their Tesla EV. So it's practical.
Right.
Yeah.
And perhaps, as Chris was talking about, the infrastructure is going to get so much better in the next decade. Yeah. One can only hope that those kinds of trips will be much easier to do here and there. Like, as you say, most of us that aren't doing a huge commute, 40, 50, 100 is lots of power. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no easy answer to that one. Yeah. But there are trade-offs, you know. Extra range requires extra batteries. Extra batteries requires more cost. Vehicle becomes more expensive, and both explicit costs to the owner and also environmental costs.
Right. So from the owner perspective, the mishaps essentially the downside has been that your battery needed to be replaced, which in the end is going to give you more life because you've got a fresh battery in there that's arguably better. Any other kind of mishaps, hassles, things that I would want to know about going into the EV ownership?
I can't think of. They're pleasant to drive, quiet, of course, wonderful pickup.
Better pickup than a combustion engine?
Much better pickup. Yeah. So, quiet, low maintenance, a little low maintenance. They're all positives. And lots of EV owners, once they've had an EV, don't want to go back to an internal combustion engine.
Right. So as the infrastructure gets better, as the batteries get better, as the volume goes up, so the price comes down, it's going to be more and more possible that we're going to have much larger fleets, both personally and industrial
and commercially. I think
EVs.
that will happen over time.
Right. So it's actually watching this all for the next 5-10 years is going to be pretty interesting.
Very much so. Yeah.
And I know that we all have concerns about how green is our energy, and I know you've been doing some lovely nerding about that, which is great. Just talk for a minute or two about what we can say about Ontario's grid in particular.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Canada as a country has, on average, a very clean grid, and there are provinces that are hydro dominant, such as Quebec and Manitoba and BC and Newfoundland, who have super low carbon emissions associated with their
personal transport,
with their grids,
right?
And therefore with an EV, and Ontario's grid is very clean as well, not quite as clean as our neighbors in Quebec and Manitoba, because we have some. There used to be coal that got eliminated, which is great. It lowered our emissions a lot. Now there's increasing amounts of gas-fired, natural gas-fired generation.
And there's some growth in that, which is problematic, right? If we love the
it's
planet, we
difficult.
don't want to have large gas sources for our grid.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
It's happening because Ontario's population is growing. Electricity demand is forecasted to increase a lot. So it's not, it's a struggle to turn the corner and clean up the grid. It's not technically a slam dunk, but it should be done.
Right. So again, if we love our planet, not only
Yeah.
do we purchase the EV, but we also do what we can to be really thinking about advocacy around the clean grid in Ontario.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Good. Well, I love how you love the planet by being in a net zero, pretty close to net zero building, driving EVs, solar powering your EV and everything else.
Yeah.
So thanks for talking about all that with us. And
You're very welcome.
Apparently
And
you do love our
I look
planet.
forward to seeing you drive your EV, new or used.
I'm hoping it'll be coming up soon. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Roger.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jenny, so you've had your episode. What do you think?
Ooh, I got lots of good detail. I feel as I understand a lot more about what it's like to be an owner. So I'm pretty charged on it.
So excited for you. Yeah,
Supercharged, because it's a big piece for me of cutting down my emissions and loving our planet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what can we do to help others to learn to do that as well?
So I'm thinking we'll put up some resources that you'll see links, and I'll also link to the article I spoke about in the Globe and Mail. A couple of good things for folks to check out to be supported on making a good choice to support the planet.
Check out the carbon footprint, all that great
stuff.
stuff.
The footprint. Right. Yep, for sure.
Excellent.
Beauty.
Okay, great. Well,
see you next
stay tuned
time
for next episodes of Love Our Planet.
Thanks for joining us.